Hello, everyone. Good to see you here. This is Writing for Tabletop Role-Playing Games. I am the moderator of the panel. I'm Kelly, IUC and him, and I am incredibly excited to be here with three of my favorite people and three of my favorite writers. Yes, that's right. I really like you, Paul. I think you're a great guy. We're going to go around in a circle. We're going to introduce ourselves. Oh, thank you for all the sub, Bongmaster. Thank you so much for the 5 subs. Immortalized there. Now, Paul, when we get to you, I did hear that you were going to show us your paranoia book. Paul is holding up his monitor with the book right now.
It's literally, I would have to take off my webcam and move the monitor. And
no, I'm joking. You don't got it. You don't got it. But let's go in a circle and introduce ourselves. As I said, I'm Kelly. It's wonderful to be here. You can see some of my products over on the Storyteller's Vault, where I've worked on a number of things with None More Dark Studios, doing a bunch of Vampire the Requiem stuff. And I am also featured in an upcoming Aberrant book that is at some point in production. I don't know. I did my part. And let's pass over to Travis. Hey, Travis, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to visit your channel. I will do my best to leave it in the condition in which I found it.
Just
with
hopefully
some more money in the coffers. I would like to reiterate what Kelly just said. Dork Tales does awesome stuff, so you should give them a bunch of money so they can continue doing awesome stuff and do more awesome stuff.
It's true. We have one project that's going to be coming in the new year that's going to blow your socks off. But I can't talk about it yet.
I look forward to socks being blown. But yeah, I'm Travis, and my pronouns are he and they. And when I'm not writing games, I'm running them over mostly at the Onyx Path Twitch, mostly.
Thanks. It's wonderful to have you here, Travis, as always. I'm very excited because you're going to be here a little more often. We haven't announced exactly in what, but you're going to be here a little more often soon, which is going to be a lot of fun.
That is true, human. That is absolutely true. Sorry.
That's just the way Travis talks to me. That's not an implication of what game it is.
None whatsoever. No.
All right, down to Astra. Hey, Astra.
Hi, my name is Astra. My pronouns are she, they, any is fine. I am a writer and illustrator, and I've worked on also a bunch of None More Dark publishing projects for Vampire the Requiem, both for art and for writing. I've also done a bunch of work on the Unity tabletop RPG, and I also work on a homegrown one, which is one of the worlds that I write novels in. So all around there, I don't actually normally stream, so if you follow this channel, that will help you in 0 ways, but I am pretty active on Twitter at Ulzareth, and I'm also on my website, which is astracrompton.com, so you can find me in any of those places if you need help on any projects.
Thank you so much for being here. Astra is also one of my oldest Canadian friends. And I mean that in length of time that we've been friends for quite a long time. And it is just wonderful to have you around. And apparently, Travis, you made someone do a double take when you humaned me, which is just great. And then finally, last but not least, Paul.
Hello,
who is one of my oldest British friends.
Is that's not true? That's not true.
Because you're not Canadian? Because you are Canadian now? Like,
I'm still in the become a Canadian line. I'm still in the queue for that. Which
you're one of my newest British friends. How's that?
I mean, probably true. Have you been seeing other British people behind my back?
I have. I can neither confirm nor deny who I've been having tea and seizing artifacts with.
I got nothing. There's nothing I can say to that. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Dean. I'm here because I've written for about half a dozen different tabletop RPGs, including the reboot of Paranoia a few years ago, which was a big hit when that happened, and some stuff for Feng Shui 2 and Zephyr and One More Quest. And I always forget a couple of them. They include, I always leave this one to last, so we're now at the end of the list anyway. Magical Kitties Save the Day, which I'm quite proud of writing for. And I've got a long history of writing for or about games, or covering tabletop or covering video games. I'm currently a video games writer, but who knows what the future holds. I just mostly, you put like food in me and like words come out. That's how it works.
Fantastic. Well, like I really want to say, honestly, genuinely, without any type of sarcasm, it is a joy to have all. It is a joy to smack my mic. It is a joy to have all three of you here, and I'm really excited to get into this. So, writing for tabletop games, I'm going to ask the hard question first of you. I am a person who has never, theoretically, I am going to pretend that I'm a person who has never written for anything. How do I get started writing for a tabletop game? I think I have all these great ideas, and I want to get started as a professional writer or a freelance author or something like that. How do I get started?
I mean, I think it depends on whether or not you are like approaching a specific project or whether you're just trying to practice your craft to get to a point where you can approach a specific project. I mean, the big thing for writing for any IP is knowledge of that IP. You don't have to be, an encyclopedia and know everything, because there are resources that you can check with, but you should at least have enough of a passion for it and enough of an understanding of the general setting that you can then research what you need to know. So I would say, like, passion about it is going to help you write better for it and fit into the style or the tone that game should have. So if you've played it, that's a definite bonus, but certainly one that you are familiar with.
Okay. So know the game I'm hounding people to let me write for. That's a good first start. How do I get in touch with anybody? Do I just send like a completed manuscript? Like, what if I was reaching out? How did you all get into writing? Because I've been writing for years. I had put out applications when Onyx Path back in like 2013 had their submit your own idea. I threw a horrible idea in that didn't get considered and things like that, right? And then it was writing. I got in through writing a bunch of stuff for Storyteller's Vault, writing independent stuff, and then self-publishing with a friend's studio, right? And that was a great way to build up my resume. But what about the rest of you?
I actually think, depending on what the piece of work is, sending a spec piece, sending like something that you've already created, especially if it's a smaller piece of something, off to folks. The worst thing that is possibly, well, there's two probably worse things that are possibly going to happen. Realistically, the worst thing that's going to happen is someone will say, no, thank you, we don't want this. I mean, the dramatically worst thing is like someone will be horribly offended because you've written something like truly like misogynist or racist or like really problematic.
That sounds like your problem, though, if you did that.
I mean, yeah. But most of us, I think the folks on this channel and watching this are not going to, the worst problem you're going to have is someone's going to say like, we don't need this right now, or sorry, we don't think that's good enough. And that was exactly my experience when I was, if we go back in sort of deep history, I wanted to write for video games magazines and review games for magazines. And I thought this would be the best possible job in the world. And so I wrote some stuff when I was like 14 and sent it to PC Gamer magazine, which is still a magazine that's going now around the world. But PC Gamer in the UK back then was edited by a few different interesting people, including a guy called Gary Witter, who I'll come back to in a minute. And they wrote back to me and they're like, this is nice. We'll keep you on the list, but like this is not sort of the thing that we want to publish right now or that we need, which was their polite way of saying like, this isn't brilliant and there's nothing here that we really want to publish. But it was enough, it gave me enough of an appetite to sort of keep trying that. And I ended up showing a portfolio of work to a different PC Gamer editor many years later, a guy called Kieran Gillen, who now writes comics. And Kieran looked at the portfolio and was like, this seems actually quite good. Do you want to, we'll commission you to just do a really short piece in the magazine. And it was because it was also made easier to do because the internet exists, and I could email stuff to people, which was quicker than just sending stuff off in the post. That's a couple of examples, but there are numerous times where I tried to like land a gig or write to somebody, and they're just like, in one way or another, they said no. And this is not an uncommon writer's experience of trying to get into something. And the moment you have a few things published, whether that might not be your first RPG supplement, but it might be, hey, I wrote something in a newspaper. I have a long history in journalism, and that showed people I could write. Or it could be even like I've I've known folks who have become successful because they produce their own good quality, consistent blogs over a long period of time. And then they have a portfolio on the internet they can point people towards. But it's very rare that the first thing you send off is going to be a hit with someone. But it's a really good point that if you know the material well, and if you're passionate about a world or a topic or an idea, and you send something off to an editor and say like, hey, I love this stuff and I think my work is good, I think sooner or later someone else is going to look at that and go, hey, there could be something here, there could be an opportunity.
That sounds great. Travis, do you have anything you want to tack onto that?
Sure, a couple things. I would like to second everything that Paul just said. For sure, but also don't be afraid to suck a lot. Like, get out there, make things that suck, and feel free to make things that suck in front of people. We are now at a place where many, not all, but many of the popular IPs have some sort of community content program. That is a good way to get spotted. Like you had mentioned, Kelly, working in Storyteller's Vault. There are a ton of those. So if there's an IP you like, there's a good chance that there's a community content program for it over at Drive-Thru RPG, or some of them also just have very, very liberal licenses. Like if you like Morkborg, for example, you can just make shit for Morkborg. Another option, obviously, is making things yourself. If you just look through and you find either find a system that has a permissive license, or make up your own system and put things together. There are the tools that are available now are astonishing, and between affordable desktop publishing options and affordable stock art, stay away from AI. It's poison for a number of reasons, but not the least of which, from a practical perspective, it is poison to your ability to claim any sort of ownership over what has been created, right? So divorcing away from all the moral implications of it, from a practical perspective, you don't want that gumming up the works of what you're working on. So those would be the things that I would recommend. And then just send in submissions. A lot of publishers will have like a submission guideline on their website. Follow that guideline. Because even if you send in something that's maybe not like the greatest writing on the planet, but it very clearly follows the rules that were laid out in those guidelines, that will get your foot in the door much, much better than an amazing piece that nobody read because you sent in 20 more pages than they asked for. So it just went directly in the circular file and they never looked at it. So
yeah, you want your foot in the door before you pull anything like that, right? Like,
right. Yeah. Follow the rules that they're laid out. They're there for a reason. And part of that reason is to easily identify people that can't follow rules and not hire them.
So as far as making your own content, there's been an absolute
people think that if you do something...
Sorry, Astra, please.
I was just going to say, like, people think that if they do something wild that makes them stand out, it honestly won't make you stand out in the right way. Like Travis was saying, the rules are there for a reason, and usually it's to make of the go away. And if you try and you get the door shut, be nail that sticks out, you're just going to get in the way. So like Travis said, that's going to get on you before you even get a chance. So, and also it's easier to write brief than it is to try to be a cowboy and do everything new that's never been done before, because somebody has done it. I mean, ideas are a dime a dozen. So following the brief is going to be getting you much closer to the finish line than if you just try to do your own thing and ignore everything else.
Yeah, it's much easier for an editor to send you red lines like revision marks and have you just update what's already there rather than have to completely rewrite something, because that's the worst feeling in the world when you have to rewrite a chapter or something like that. And on that front, about creating your own stuff we were talking about a second ago, there has been an absolute explosion of one-page role-playing games and things like that. So you don't have to design a 300-page manual. You can literally do a one-page or a two-page role-playing game that will get your name out there. And like, really start getting some traction, and it allows you to play with mechanics that are really simplistic and elegant in that way. Also, if you do go the self-publishing route, way cheaper to do a one-page role-playing game that you sell for $1 or something like that, or 50 cents at a con, than it is to print an entire manual. But with that, I'm curious, Astra, you have done a lot of work in the self-publishing industry behind, like, as an editor and as part of the self-publishing machine. How is that for purposes of role-playing games, do you think? Do you think that's a viable option for a way to kind of break into the scene?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my background in gaming, aside from, you know, my brew and whatnot, was actually as an editor. They were looking for writers, and I'm like, well, I also write. That was kind of how I got into the Unity project. Is that they were looking for writers, and the editor on the project had worked with me as a fiction writer. And had recommended me to that. And it was a self-published project. They did a big Kickstarter. They got a lot of support for it, and that was how the book was produced. And for most of the games, like the smaller games that I've run, have been LARPs. So I've been writing, you know, character content from that standpoint, where it's very heavy on character, very light on crunch. I've also worked with Enigmatic Games, which is a group here in Victoria that does game events, and I've written content for them. So a lot of those pieces came from kind of startup independent projects where somebody had a cool idea, and rather than kind of building a whole company, they were like, we just need enough bodies to do the work, and then, you know, have a nice time. And so the focus was on building an excitable or fun game experience rather than on building a sort of like make off it. And I think you're seeing a lot more of is that, you know, like those one sheet games, it doesn't take as much of an investment in time. It's much easier to play test to make sure that those things are working. And so it's something that doesn't take you as long, that you can kind of dive into and like have fun with. And if people are having fun with it, they're more likely to talk about it. So it is a really good way to kind of, you know, get your work out there, your ideas out there in a way that people can engage with. And then that can snowball and can open doors in other avenues. So yeah, it's definitely much more accessible, I think, in that way. And there are a lot of like sandbox ones, whether it's a format or a system like the one page, like weekend games and stuff, where you can just skin that with whatever idea you have. There are games like Weave, which are like based on, you know, writing up descriptions for different cards, and then as you pull them, it'll build the game for you in an app. So you can just write the content for an existing system, and those games are designed to be used that way by the community. So again, you don't need to write an entire thing from the ground up. There are things that you can put your stamp on, put your writing into, that are already kind of half baked by the community, and you can create something new with that. So it again gives you an audience that's already there, already interested, that can then talk about it if they enjoy it.
And on that front, we've talked a bit about community content. And so there are, for those who are unaware, there is a website called DriveThruRPG, which is probably the largest purveyor that I know of community-generated content that you get paid for. There may be others, but DriveThruRPG basically is this, it's a print-on-demand role-playing site where you can access a huge network of PDFs from past role-playing games. I think all the way back to like first edition D&D you can get through that. And it has some subsidiaries like Dungeon Masters Guild for D&D stuff, Storyteller's Vault for World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness stuff, and then everything else under the DriveThruRPG label. According to licenses underneath there, you can create products using their licensing guides, and they'll take a cut, and you'll get a remainder of the money. And it's a good way to build up a little war chest, I think. Travis, you do a lot of stuff with DriveThruRPG and Storyteller's Vault.
I do. Not as much anymore because I sold my soul to Onyx Path. But but I still once in a while crank out some stuff for ye old community content programs. I also just because I don't get a chance to talk about it much on Twitch because I'm almost always on the Onyx Path channel. I run a publishing company myself, and
that's true.
My company, Aegis Studios, we got one of the Savage Worlds Aces licenses, and we've got a game coming out probably this summer that's going to be using the Savage Worlds system. But they also have a very good community content program that is comparatively very favorable in terms of like what the creator earns versus what the payout is. A lot of the community content programs, I think it's like 25 or 30%. Forgive me if I'm wrong about those numbers. But
for
it's much
profit or for
like what you for like your take of it or whatever. It's like
on Storyteller's Vault, it's 50-50.
I guess like 50. And then
I think it's 60-40 or 65-35. Not in your favor for DM's Guild.
Right, and it's like 60 or 65 in your favor for the Savage Worlds one.
Is that's really good?
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good program. Highly recommend it, and it's also a super easy system to pick up and learn. But of course, obviously, DM's Guild is a big deal. And you know, not to suck all the air out of the room talking about like numbers and whatnot, but I personally
I just want to say real quick, when I was a writing student, I did years of workshop. I did years of like theory and all of this stuff. The most useful class I ever took was one called The Writing Business, where they actually sat us down and told us how to make money. Right, it was the most interesting and the most important because it gave us a realistic look at what it's like to be a writer. So please break down the numbers for a few minutes.
Sure. I guess, well, I mean, without getting super far into like stuff that I don't have open in front of me, I guess my point would be is that DM's Guild is super cool because it lets you get into D&D 5th edition, which everybody's into. But the other side of that coin is everybody's into it. So you're trying to get some attention on yourself in an extremely flooded market. Whereas, for example, like with Savage Worlds, with Storyteller's Vault, the number of people you were fighting on a daily basis to get your work in front of is smaller. So that is one of the things I would recommend about that. But to that end too, I mean, just, you know, again, kicking out something yourself and putting it up on Drive-Thru-RPG, you can set up a publisher page there in about 15 minutes, I think. That's not very difficult.
It's fair.
So that's always an option as well.
Now, we have two questions from the audience that I think we should touch on real quick. And the first one is one from Second Gen Gamer, and it is, what's easier for you to write, mechanics or fiction? Because role-playing games do tend to have a lot of fiction involved. So I'll go last. Does anybody want to hop in? We'll just popcorn it.
I'd like to jump in because I think it's a great question. And I feel like at different points in my life, the answer has been different. Like now, for me, I find it much easier to write fiction and to build worlds. So much so that one or two jobs I've been on, it's been a bit of a problem where the editor has got back to me and been like, it's great, the scenario is great. You haven't actually created like any set pieces with, you know, balanced stats. You've written here like this is a cool point for an ambush, but actually maybe you could give the people in the module like a preset ambush with some actual stats for characters and stats for how things happen. And that's because I've got more florid as I've got older, I guess. But the younger version of me was all about coming into like older D&D versions was just all about the stats and what can I do with these different dice combinations and all these different numbers and how can I build a system and change a system. I think that's because I've become also more system agnostic as I've got older, and I think in the old days when we gatekept more and it was still more of a or even more of a sexist hobby and even more restricted, knowing the rules and knowing the systems was sort of how people are supposed to prove themselves and be the best possible players. And now some of us have matured and it's much more about let's tell cool stories and let's be collaborative and let's create interesting narratives. And that's probably the direction that I've gone in as well. I think both are cool. I think both have they're like two ends of a spectrum and you don't want to be too much at one or the other. You've got to be able to do some of both. Fair.
I'm along the same lines as Paul, but for me, my background is writing fiction. So like I wrote novels first and then moved into games. So for me, that's my comfort zone. But I will say that like with a homebrew system where I'm building my own system, that understanding some of the basic pieces of crunch and like what structure the game was based around, like for me, I decided to use the unloved D8 because no one uses it. And so, a lot of those things informed how the rest of the world was built and how that crunch worked. How does magic work? So knowing some of those key things then helped me write it better and make it more consistent and make more sense from a world building perspective. So I do think it kind of feeds one into the other. It's easier for me to write fiction because I need a lot more playtesting with crunch, especially if I'm working in somebody else's system. I need to make sure I'm not breaking that system or making sure that it's balanced. So for those pieces, I always defer to whatever like master I'm working for on like, okay, here's my idea. This is how I think it would work in crunch, but like feel free to tweak. So I definitely would say I lean more towards fiction, but I think you need to understand enough about that crunch that it makes sense. Most modern games, or at least modern gamers, will take the pieces of crunch that they need and they can kind of fluff some of the like minutia if it's getting in the way of storytelling. So there is always that balance piece of like, it should be there for the people who need those pieces to run their game. But you also have to understand that, a lot of players are maybe not going to use all of those fine points. So it needs to work outside of the crunch, even if the crunch is solid, so that it is a good idea, compelling idea that somebody would want to play.
Absolutely. I kind of feel the same way. Like I come from a fiction background as well, so fiction and the freedom to create once I kind of know what the goal is really paramount to me as a writer. And I actively dislike writing inside of, it depends on the mechanics. There are certain systems where I feel like we've kind of done most of what we can do with this, and I only really feel creatively in the Vampire the Requiem stuff that we've been doing for Chronicles of Darkness. I feel much happier when I am allowed to like ignore writing about vampires and instead am like, okay, go write fiction for them. Okay, great. Or go create these monsters that hunt vampires, and you get to create all the systems for them, and you get to break and bend the rules in weird ways to be scary. I'm like, oh yeah, that's great, because I don't feel constrained by where I'm trying not to step on toes that have already been there. And I personally feel that makes sometimes writing for D&D a little weird, because if you're trying to create something for D&D, like you're trying to create a new class, it's really hard to do it without feeling like, A, you're just restating something that's already been put out, or B, you're putting out, and I don't know if this is a term that really goes outside of game develop, but a parasitic system. Like a system that is... It's like an like in sometimes expansion packs, they'll have like a new mechanic that doesn't really work with the rest of the game, but it works because they're introducing a new feature. It's that type of thing. Like you don't, oh, thank you so much for the tip.
Shanty tip
so
$50.
I'm always very conscious of that, like trying not to add like vestigial elements onto a game that's very lean. Like, I don't know. It's a worry of mine. And I've been trying to develop new classes for a while. I don't know. They're difficult. Travis.
My favorite is whichever one I'm not working on at the moment. I mean, they both have their frustrations. I know I've been very spoiled in that I've gotten to work on a lot of games that follow kind of my general philosophy about tabletop role-playing design, which is, that you want those elements to be as seamless as possible. And obviously they're never really seamless. There's always some barrier between the world and the crunch, I guess you can say. But being able to work on like story path and being able to work on like mage have been, those are a couple of properties that I think meld those two elements pretty beautifully, and there's a bit of a symphony to them. But having said that, though,
right for mage, I would kill, and I would bury the body to write for mage.
I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to work on mage when I had the opportunity to work on mage. It was definitely a like bucket list thing, and I'm glad I was able to do it. But I guess to kind of counterpoint your point about D&D and about vestigial things, I really get a kick out of looking for the gaps in existing design and finding a way to fill them. You know, just as an example for D&D, when I was working on Dead Man's Rust, you know, the core concept of that game, funnily enough, we started developing it about a year before COVID hit. So we were kickstarting it like right when COVID was hitting. It's a game about a magical disease, perfect timing. But one of the design difficulties in that was trying to make a magical disease that was actually threatening in 5th edition D&D, which 5th edition D&D is designed literally to make that never a problem. So we had to do some bolting on of additional systems. And I find that to be a lot of fun. I think playing with the negative space in an existing system can be a really good time.
Awesome. I also wanted to thank both Shanty and WK Green for just donating. We have crossed the $1,000 threshold, which means that there's another ASMR video. And apparently the chat has voted that it should be a Mage the Ascension, the ASMR video. So congrats, there's going to be a Mage the Ascension ASMR video on the internet now, which if I can't write for it, I'll ASMR it, damn it.
Well, that's going to be the first time that's ever happened.
I honestly don't think there's very many World of Darkness, like lots of vampire ones, but that's it. Like,
there's more people than I would have ever expected who are role-playing vampires for ASMR for whatever purpose. There is a market.
Because they all want to speak at you like this through their fangs.
I had no idea there was World of Darkness ASMR. That's
just vampire for the most part. Just vampire.
Blowing.
I think I've seen like maybe one Wraith one.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because I'm a spooky ghost. Oh, I have a filter for that I could put on later.
No.
A detailed explanation of the spheres in ASMR. We're going to talk about Happy Little Prime. Some Happy Little Prime to blow up your happy little friends. Do you prefer, another question from the chat, do you prefer game building in a team or on your own?
Can I hop in again at the start? Would that be okay?
Yeah, if you're quick, you're like, wait.
I mean, it depends on the game. Yeah, please.
I want to say the thing about this is I feel like people envisage writing as being a solitary task. And, you know, you're up there in your garret or some other high place by a window and you're typing away and you maybe have an old typewriter like Angela Lansbury. But I actually love working in a team and I love trading ideas with people on a team and being creative on a team. And when I worked on, as I brought up at the start, when I worked on Magical Kitty Save the Day, that was a 2nd edition. That was a reboot. I did a whole scenario for that as part of a wider team. And our editor at Atlas Games was Michelle Nephew. And it was her job to look at threads that we were developing in our individual scenarios and find crossovers. And she was a terrific editor, but she was also someone who would ping you and say, hey, if you develop this, this thing that you're writing this scenario, we're going to make it connect to this other person's scenario. And not only did working closely with an editor make my work better, because she did make my work better, it made my work sort of more coherent and more cohesive within the wider ecosystem, the wider system of magical cats around the world in many different places, of which there are a lot, it turns out. And generally, like when I've worked on video games or when I've made, used to make an awful lot of videos on the internet, or when I have done previous journalism type work, it's first of all, it's never hurt me to have an editor and to have somebody who says to me either no, or, you know, you can do this better, or this needs to be shorter or something like that. But it also just, I think inevitably you do strengthen one another and you get different perspectives, and you get to sanity check so much more. And I think that's actually really, really good. And I do like writing solo, and that's fine, but I kind of love the team thing. And I think as long as no one's ego is too big, it's actually great to cede a bit of control to other people around you and get perspectives, get feedback.
That's absolutely true. I want to do a particular call out right now and say I'm working under Travis on a project. Travis is one of the best editors that I've ever worked under, and it's because he cheerleads you. He's got a really great way. No, seriously, like you're.
It's very sweet of you
fan.
to say, but I'm a developer, not an editor.
Oh, fair. You're right. Well, you were guiding me. You were a puppet master. How's that? It's even better. But you're a cheerleader for what's coming through, but you're also able to like, you're so enthusiastic about the good stuff that you're able to basically get your writers to change things without them realizing that they're changing it. And that's an incredible skill to be able to make people fix themselves.
Well, that's very sweet of you to say. I mean, I think that, and then I will get the heck out of the way for Astra, who I know has been very patiently waiting to share some thoughts. But I think, yeah, the people do their best work when they're treated well and encouraged, and when you can, yeah, just be supportive and gas up their ideas, but. And also thank you for saying nice things.
And like what Travis is saying too is like for any IP, it's not your project, right? So working with somebody who can encourage you and like tell you what's going on with other pieces that somebody else is working on is going to make the whole project more cohesive. But you can't, if you want to write for an existing tabletop RPG, you can't come into it with ego. You know, like you need to be a team player in that project. You can't be like, I've written the best thing ever, and they're like, hey, I have notes, and you're like, no, you can't change my idea. Like that's not going to fly. So you do need to come in and be really flexible in what you're doing, and obviously having like a good project lead will make that feel collaborative. It'll make it feel like, okay, how can we make this better? Or this might be a cool idea, but it's not really fitting for what we need, or it oversteps something that already exists too much. So how can we pivot it? What's the nugget that's exciting, that's new, that we can then build up? So going into any of your notes from your project lead with that mindset will help it feel more exciting and less like disheartening that you have to rewrite stuff. So I think that is a really enriching experience. And if you are able to work on a team, you're going to develop your skills a lot faster. You're going to make a lot more progress. You're going to learn how to co-work with other people a lot easily than if you were just working on your own. I do love the creative process of working on my own because like you can do whatever you want. No one can tell you no, but you can only take that so far if you're building your own game, because you will need other people to play test. You will need other people to let you know if an idea is not working, or if it's you know, cultural appropriation, or like you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Like everyone has blind spots, no matter how skilled of a writer you are. Everyone does. So there comes a point when you're working on your own where you will need to bring in other eyes on it. And again, even though it's your idea, you can't be pretentious about it. If somebody is letting you know something's not working, whether that's crunch or content, you need to listen, because that's not going to be the only person who's going to have that reaction. You may not take all of their, you know, suggestions or solutions. The Neil Gaiman quote that I always kind of fall back on is, if somebody tells you something's not working, 9 times out of 10, they're right. If they tell you how to fix it, 9 times out of 10, they're wrong. But you need to listen to the feedback, even if it's your own project, so that you can make it the best it can be.
Neil Gaiman had wise advice. That's no, he's always got great
shocking
advice.
And amazing. And the one thing I did want to just touch on real quick, part of the reason why I made the distinction when we were talking a second ago about development versus editors, because I want to make sure that I never step on the toes of the amazing work that editors do. And how highly I advise, if you are going to go into either community content or just even doing you know, self-publishing, I cannot advise you highly enough to go acquire an editor, someone whose sole job is to go through and make sure that you are clearly communicating your ideas to the world, because that's a very different skill set than let's build a world together and make some systems and have some fun. That's a cool, awesome skill set. Making sure that it makes sense is often a completely different skill set, and it's very valuable.
Nice. All right, so we have another question that I'm going to pop up. I think it'll probably be a pretty quick one, but I've been wrong many times in my life. I'm not sure if this has been asked. Has writing tabletop has writing for tabletop role-playing games become easier or more difficult over time? Astra, why don't you start us off, because you've answered inside of our private chat.
I would say if you're talking about I think if you're talking about, is it easier the longer you do it? Is it easier now than it was, 20 years ago? Also, I think much easier for two main reasons. The first one is that there's a lot more resources available to you more easily. So you're not needing to like dumpster dive for like a second edition D&D book. Like you can easily find that. A lot of the games have wikis that you can go to that have a lot of information. There's a lot more people who are playing, so there's a lot of knowledge that you can lean on. So I think in that sense, it's definitely easier to get the information you need and to like figure out where the blanks are, like Travis was saying, so that you can fill them. I think where some newer writers may have a bit of hesitancy is that they think, oh, every idea has been done. Like there's less room to play. And I think that there's no way to have no more ideas. Even if an idea has been done, if it was done 20 years ago, it may not have been done that great. It can be, facelifted. It can be improved. There are new ways to think about ideas. There are new perspectives to bring to old ideas. So even if you feel like, everything's been written or there's nowhere to go, no, there's still plenty of things that can be written on. So don't be kind of daunted by the wealth of information that's out and feel like there's no space for you. Use that wealth of information to inspire yourself, because you might find a gap or you might find something that sparks a new idea.
That's fantastic. And you're absolutely right, talking about dumpster diving and how you don't have to do that anymore. And you have so much contact with the material. If you were trying to write about something and you wanted a perspective about, say, you were writing something for Dragonlance, for example, old D&D product from the 80s that's starting to get revived now, you can literally tweet the creators and ask them a question, or join I'm in a Facebook group with Margaret Weiss.
Wow.
It's like, and she responds to things. She comments on people's like, oh, I did a Tasselhoff cosplay, and she's like, that looks really nice. She's a lovely lady from the sound of it. She seems really nice. But you could just ask a question like, hey, what did you think when you wrote this or something? And the creators who you've idolized since childhood can be like, oh no, I had a tummy ache that day or something, and you'd be like, oh, okay, I don't know what to do with that, but at least I have an answer.
It is, yeah, it's so true that there's no guarantee that everybody on the internet is going to respond to you all the time, but it's another possible avenue of connection that might help you in that context. I had to physically put myself in the same room as Ursula Le Guin to ask her a question, so that's a bit of a different kind of dynamic, and I don't think she ended up ever on Twitter, and I wonder what she would have thought of that. But I've been able to, in the older days of the internet, connect with people via email. And then we do have social media now, where again, in the same situation to other situations, like if you come across like decent and polite and you have something reasonable that you want to ask, there's a chance someone might get back to you. And they, at the same time, may notice you, may remember you somewhere later down the line.
Well, and another thing, this is probably something that we'll get into a little bit on the next panel, I assume as well, Kelly. But Google's only 20 years old. You know what I'm saying? As one of the resident olds, if you were trying to write the World of Darkness in, say, the 1990s, when the World of Darkness was initially written, you had a very much smaller and different set of resources at your disposal to come up with how you were going to present all these real world topics. And I happen to truly, from the bottom of my soul, believe that those folks that were working on that at the time were doing the best work that they could do and the most socially conscious work they could do at that time with the resources that they have available. But it's a different world now, and you can really reach out and discuss with people who are actually affected by the work you're doing, what that impact of that work is. But also, again, as a resident old, there's so much shit that people don't know of that's 20 years old. I drop references all the time and just get blank stares from people
Drop one.
who are I don't know. I'll drop like a random Jack Burton reference, and while all of us might understand what that is, you know, there are the young folk who don't.
Do you want to know one that will shock people coming out of my mouth? Until this year, I didn't know what Planescape was.
Right. Yeah. See, I mean,
if you said Planescape Torment, I could kind of remember the cover of that I saw in the video store or like at a video game store, like with the blue face on it. Right. I didn't know about that until within the past 6 months.
Kelly, do you know what Dark Sun is?
I know of it now. But you have to remember, I grew up in a tiny town in the middle of Missouri. Where the first book of D&D that I ever got was Encyclopedia Magica Volume 2, and I couldn't understand a damn word of it because I didn't know what a D6 was, because they never explain it in the book because it's Volume 2.
Right.
And I was a 16-year-old kid being like, you couldn't Google it. There was no D&D information on the internet.
We still do that in the world today. We still, like, I'm sure everybody watching this right now in the channel knows what RPG stands for, but at some point someone's going to encounter that and they don't know, and we still... I think it's still our job to make those
rocket-propelled grenade.
Make those on-ramps for people. Kelly, let's reboot Dark Sun because it's been a hot minute and we could probably make a better version of it for the modern
Aren't they
day.
bringing it back next year anyway in a very lackluster 3-book set?
I highly doubt that they're going to bring Dark Sun back. If they do, they're going to, I'm certain it's not going to be anything like it was.
It's because it was like full of slavery and
there's a lot of super problematic stuff in Dark Sun.
Yeah, okay.
And once again,
this is why we need to reboot it. We can
Bright Sun.
The good elements out and throw the old ones away and give people a better version of it.
Well, and here's the thing: I'm about to say some really controversial shit on your channel, Kelly. So buckle up.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to put? I'll make a text warning. Hold on. Sure.
The problem isn't with problematic material. The problem is with handling problematic material poorly. I really, at the core of my being, believe that to be true. I don't think that there's any reason why you can't have elements that are, controversial or upsetting or downright atrocious in your games, provided that you're keeping people informed of the content that's in that game, that you are handling the material respectfully, that where appropriate, you are making sure that you are consulting with people who are affected by whatever that element is. But I just don't subscribe to the idea that there are things that we shouldn't be talking about in games. I think that's silly.
To add to the Google thing, and on top of that, we now have access on the internet very easily to, not only do we have more and more sensitivity readers out there, people you can hire who will help inform you and help tell you where you're treading and how carefully you are or aren't. We just have the wider world of people to bounce ideas off, and more public examples of the right way to go about doing things and the wrong way to go about doing things.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the other thing too, especially if you're operating at a level that's not like Wizards of the Coast where you're printing books, right? Or even, Onyx Path, they do print runs of books. If you're operating at a level where you're primarily churning out digital material, it is a very small ask for you to go back in. If you put something out in the world and somebody's like, yeah, that's a problem because of X, Y, and Z, nowadays you can just go in and change it. You can just fix the problem.
Well, and that's something that really happened recently. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. So on Dork Tales recently, we ran Spelljammer when it came out. They have gone and errated the ending of the module that they included in here recently. Because originally it has kind of like a Death Star ending, and they decided that so you blow up a star and it kills everybody inside of a solar system, and they're like, maybe this is bad. Maybe we shouldn't just indiscriminately wipe out a solar system. So they rewrote it, and it's so strange because they rewrote it within a month of its publication or 2 months of its publication, like completely revised, and they have the power to go back and do those type of changes now, which is wild. In print media, that's so weird.
It's a little weird, but I mean, and again, it's one of those things where Yes, I think we can all agree the idea of blowing up an entire inhabited star system, probably not awesome. But also, though, like, you know, not something that I necessarily think needs to be locked away in the dungeon of ideas we never touch again either.
Fair. I mean, to be fair, it was a pretty empty solar system, you know, just saying.
Right. Didn't we just all watch like a super inhabited planet get blown up a couple years ago in the most recent Star Wars movie?
Like, which one was that? The
Vulcan, right? Vulcan got blown up like
that was
10
Star
years ago.
Trek.
Star Wars. Sorry.
You just caused me physical pain, Kelly.
sorry. I'm thinking about. I got Trek on the brain right now for some reason. No, you're absolutely.
I don't know why.
You're right. We did. We watched a lot of stuff happen in Star Wars recently. Like, I can't keep track, man. It's not great. So, speaking of that, how about handling retcons and facelifts of old content? Since we're talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing for PLEA changing stuff, the old version's still there. If you want to cling tight to that old problematic version, you still have it. It hasn't gone anywhere. But I think that there's been a big push that I'm really glad to see to try and make gaming more inclusive. And so, you know, coming back to some of these old ideas that even if, you know, Travis mentioned earlier, like with the information they had at the time, they were trying to be inclusive and trying to be, you know, progressive in the ideas that they're playing with, maybe weren't handled great. Maybe it's not even about problematic stuff, but just the crunch was wonk, or like, you know, for example, in the Requiem for Rome project that we're doing right now, the debate system, that person, you know, they understood their Latin rhetoric, but it's not fun to play. You know, so like, what can we do with this that makes it a better gaming experience? So, and I'm very excited about the new stuff that they've come up with for that. I'm very excited. But that's
I'm very curious.
Right? Like, yeah.
Because I actually played a Logic debate master when I played through Fall of the Camarilla back in the day under our mutual friend Roman, and I had a great time with it. So I'm really curious to see how, because I haven't looked at the new system because I didn't need it for any of my portions. So, by the way, folks, if you're excited, Requiem for Rome is getting a second edition that we're fan publishing on Storyteller's Vault, and that's through No More Dark. It has been announced and is going to be fantastic. Astra, sorry for cutting you off to say that, but I just wanted to.
No. Worthy to say. No, that's just it, right? If you want to pull in those elements from the original debate system, you still can. But we've come up with some more like active pieces that can be used, right? So things that make it a bit easier, that if you are, you know, for example, a newer player, or you're not as, you know, glib as a player, you don't have the gift of gab, it's hard to sometimes use some of the skills that your character has when you can't do it. In the same way of playing like a bard in D&D, and they're like, all right, what song do you sing? And you're like, I don't know, I can't compose a song on the spot. So giving players a way to still engage with what their character is doing that doesn't require you to suddenly become a Latin rhetoric master, because if you aren't, then that can be difficult to try and do in an effective way on the over the table. So yeah, making games more accessible is like the best part of retconning, but it does mean that you do need to kind of understand that you're going to lose some pieces, right? Like, you have to kind of excise some stuff to make room for whatever new take you're doing on it, and sometimes that means you're losing good things, but again, they're not going anywhere. They still exist.
I feel like that is a really, really good way of describing it. The old versions do exist. It reminds me, I can't remember which author said it, but somebody asked an author about, you worried about whether this movie adaptation has ruined your book or affected your books? And the author went and pointed at their bookshelf and like, well, the books are still there, they're fine. People can buy them, and they'll, you know, the movie will make some more people interested in the book, and the book remains unchanged. And I and some of my friends, like in the years past, held on to D&D 2nd edition, or really D&D 2.5 Skills and Powers, much longer than that remained relevant, because we'd created a bunch of stuff in it, and we were using this old TSR, who remembers them, software that enable us to like not only update our characters, but like customize our characters. And we were so locked into this system that we just didn't really hop onto 3rd edition for so long. And we made that choice, and we knew that we could do that. And the new edition existing, like, people didn't come around our house and take our old stuff away. Because it's not what happens.
Because that's what they do. They kick in the door and they're like, "Retcon police."
Well, this is so my first project was Paranoia, and Paranoia was a reboot, and we rebuilt the world as well as doing a new system. We were like, okay, we're reimagining the idea of Paranoia, and the broad concept is about the same, but the specifics are different. Like, the enemies are no longer communists that might not exist, that make everybody paranoid and ultra defensive, and you know, make you turn on one another. The enemies that now may not exist, that make you all ultra paranoid and turn on one another, are terrorists. But they're definitely a real problem, so we have to have all these systems to protect. And the idea was it's supposed to reflect some of what happens in the real world. And there were some people who didn't like that, but broadly speaking, a lot of it was very, very well received, and it did very, very well. But Astra's point as well is like, yeah, you will lose things, you will leave some stuff behind. I don't feel bad about leaving some of that behind with the folks who already have what they want. I feel better about bringing new people in and writing something where we tried to front more women characters, and tried to have something that was more socially relevant to what is going on right now, and something that people might play and might make them think a bit more about the world around them as well.
Well, right. And if I can, two things. One, I just want to fangirl for a second, because it's awesome that you worked on Paranoia. That's super cool. But secondly, there's nothing worse than social commentary that's 30 years out of date. You know what I mean? Like,
what's the deal with airplane
Time
food?
capsule.
Actually, that one didn't age out. Airplane food's still pretty bad. I
was gonna say, do they still feed people on airplanes?
It depends.
I haven't been on an airplane in a while, I realize. What's the other thing, Travis?
Oh, that was the other thing.
Oh, was it?
One was fangirling, two was the
oh, okay. I also think that, like, talking about retconning, and Astra, you brought it up, the idea of accessibility, and it was kind of furthered. There's so much that has changed in the way that we perceive the world. And Travis, as you were talking about early White Wolf properties, for example, we talked about it, or it was spoken about in the feminism panel earlier today, and the progression of morality systems being tied to mental health, and how that has been completely phased out. Because in a lot of these systems, it's, yes, you suffer trauma, so you gain a mental health condition, or you are a bad person, so you now have depression or anxiety or something. And it's equating two things, and it's like trauma, for example, could lead to the development of certain mental health disorders. The fact that you, I don't know, in some games go and shoplift some candy and suddenly you have paranoia. Okay, it's kind of weird. Or worse, schizophrenia, like a named condition, a named medical diagnosis, because you accidentally, I don't know, did a dine and dash at a restaurant. Suddenly you're schizophrenic. Like, these are very outdated modalities. And it's even more so when we talk about things like racism. There are a lot of games that have, like, intrinsically built racism. Not to pick on White Wolf too much, but old Vampire the Masquerade stuff is chock full of it. I have a rule at my table, especially for stream, that if Clan Ravnos ever comes into play, you have to use the new rules, because their old one was literally, you are a member of the old word, the politically banned word for Romani. And you have a horrible compulsion to lie, cheat, and steal. And it's like, this is really bad, guys. Like, how did this get through? That's like telling my indigenous players, like, and myself, like, okay, but you have to I don't even know. I don't even know what type of racist thing I could write about that, to be honest. It's so improper. So
Yeah,
I've got off my soapbox.
There were some missteps
But
and some
it's true though with a lot of
glaring
those
holes.
pieces where, you know, just from same with like villainy as well, like not just your player characters but also the villains that you're writing for these games, of like who they're fighting against and what the justification is for why they are the villain. And I mean, my favorite villains from all media are always the ones who are the heroes of their own stories, but it helps if you strip those pieces out of the game mechanics and the game lore, so that you know, DM doesn't just default back to like, well, they're crazy and therefore they're going to do this bad thing. That's the only reason why they would. It's like, no, there needs to be motivation. And so removing those pieces from the game mechanics will help prevent that kind of narrative from being perpetuated, I think. So just being more conscientious of, you know, who's playing, not just what characters they're playing, but also what impact your storytelling is having on those players.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Travis, what were you saying in regards to that as well? That's a fantastic point, Astra.
Oh, I was just saying that, yeah, there were missteps before, but obviously you know, going back to the 90s and whatnot, but and again, I don't know that the lens of hindsight can be pretty unforgiving. And I think when you're visiting, I think when you're revisiting old material and looking for ways to bring it into a contemporary audience, you have to do a bit of a gut check and, if not give the creators, give the material the benefit of the doubt in the sense that let's strip away any perceived malice and let's try to get at the heart of what kind of story are we trying to tell, and is there an aspect of this story that's just raw garbage? Because if there is, chuck it, you know, get rid of it. It's not important. But for the most part, though, you know, I think you can find salvageable material within there. You just got to cut out the trash. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And the thing is, after the revisions, it's fine. Like you looked at it and you're like, this is a cultural thing that doesn't fly these days. It's hard not to say
better, I guess, for lack of a better term.
We know better. Yeah. Like we know, you know, it's not just a bunch of people using basic Google. You actually have people from these cultures able to write about their own experiences, which is something actually, Travis, when you were working on Lore of the Traditions, you really drew in a ton of voices from communities that were underserved by previous editions. I
mean, the key to good game development is hiring well, always, but especially when you're working on a book that, you know, Mage is a setting that, for better or for worse, draws from real world mystical practices and real world cultural practices. So whenever possible, I think it's the best practice is to hand the microphone to the person who you're trying to represent whenever possible. You know, it's not always possible, just because, you know, at the end of the day, while D&D is super popular and whatnot, TTRPGs are still a teeny tiny itty bitty little industry. So, you know, sometimes you don't connect with the people you would like to connect with, but, you know, more often than not, I think you can. And I think putting in the effort is super important.
That's absolutely true. Does anybody else have any tips, tricks, advice, anything they want to say to aspiring authors? We got about 5 minutes before we have to do our exit.
Okay,
but
I'd love to jump in with two really quick things that I wish folks had told me when I was starting. Way at the start of this, I brought up the old PC Gamer editor, Gary Witter, who began as as far as I know, in making magazines, I think, about games. And he's transitioned to writing for things like Walking Dead and Halo games. He's written books, he's written for TV, and like he's written films like Book of Eli and a film called Rogue One, which it turns out was a popular Star Wars film. He didn't have like a straight line as a writer where he's like, he got up one day and was like, right, here are all my scripts for Star Wars. Here they go. I'm going to send them in until one's accepted. Sometimes you can get into writing from all kinds of different angles and start in different ways. And what you start doing is not what you're going to have to do forever. But once you have things published and once you get into the habit of being a regular writer, which is a really good habit to have, that's going to help you so much. And that's a thing I didn't learn. This is the other thing that I didn't learn enough when I was a kid, that writing is, and we talked about this a bit in the green room beforehand, Travis mentioned this, just if you write lots and lots, you gradually get better at it. And I assume it's the same for art. It's the same for me, like playing instruments. The more you do the thing, there aren't people out there who are like, oh, I spent all this time writing and now I'm worse. So keep trying. If it doesn't work the first time or the second time or the 10th time, or if you suck after like months of doing something, that's fine. My favorite writer is Kurt Vonnegut, and he used to write drafts by typing a draft on his typewriter, finishing it, putting it to one side, rereading and retyping it as he was reading it to correct it. And he would redraft this way, which is very sort of laborious and slow, but it's because his first drafts were not always great, which is something that Stephen King has shared in his writing advice. And other writers who are successful have generally talked about how they write lots and they gradually build something. And even when they are good at their job, their drafts and their work can still start off very bad.
That's absolutely the case. And if you are a writer and you're listening to this and you have not at least skimmed your library's copy of Stephen King's On Writing, by the way, you probably should, because even if you don't like his writing, he knows more about writing than most human beings alive today.
It's hands down the best collection of writing advice I've ever seen in my life.
Yep, and it's not condescending. It's really accessible, and it's really funny. He's a funny dude, and yeah, that's my advice. Get that book, even if it's just at the library. Your library will have a copy.
A few other great writing resources, aside from On Writing. There's Writing with Power by Peter Elba, which is great if you deal with any sort of writer's block or imposter syndrome. Lots of different exercises. It has been the most accessible book that I've seen because it has covered like every type of reason of why you're struggling to write. Most books that I read are like, well, when you have writer's block, and that's not a problem that I have, but it had other things in it that I do have that I've never seen addressed in a writing book before. Things like, is it me or is it the project, when you get rejections and whatnot. So it deals with some of those pieces that I don't see covered as often. And another great one for more of like a specific like line level craft is Sin and Syntax, because it goes through all kind of the rules of writing and when and why to break them. Because a lot of writing advice books are very prescriptive. And this is like every rule can be broken if you're doing it intentionally and for the right reasons. And with tabletop RPG writing specifically, a lot of it is mood, a lot of it is tone, and a lot of that requires you to write with a very specific voice that you need to practice for somebody else's voice, not necessarily your own writing. So writing diversely and reading diversely in different genres will help you to kind of hone, well, what makes it sound like a Western, what makes it sound like a noir, so that you can slip into the tone of the type of project that you want to work on.
Absolutely. Travis, do you have any advice that you want to throw in?
I guess the biggest piece of productivity advice that I would give, because that's important. Definitely practice, definitely be writing, but count words, not hours. You'll drive yourself absolutely up a wall if you try to I'm going to write for 3 hours a day. Don't do that to yourself or your loved ones or anyone in your life. Just pick a number of words. I'm going to write 300 words a day and do that. And your life will be much happier. I promise.
And they do not have to be good words. Just get the damn words down. The hardest thing that for me to learn as someone who struggles with attention deficit disorder and all of the comorbidities that has, you can always revise those words. You have plenty of time. And the scariest thing in the world is a blank page for me. Once you're in it, oh man, it's so easy to revise.
You can't edit a blank page.
You really can't.
Right, exactly. Yeah, hell is staring at a cursor blank on a blank page. I think that sounds like something Neil Gaiman might have said once.
Yeah, Taika Waititi did a tweet about that, where sometimes writing is staring at a blank page for 8 hours, wondering whether or not you're a real writer, drinking way too much coffee, and then shutting your laptop in disgrace and starting tomorrow. Something like that. And like that is being a writer, right? Being a writer is a little slice of hell, but we do it because it's also a slice of heaven, right? God, hopefully, at least. Hopefully.
I used to say, I don't like writing, I like having it written.
That's you know what, I want to end on that. So let's go in reverse order. Why don't say where we can find your writing, where we can find you, and who you've been. Let's start with Paul. Hey, Paul.
Where I've been.
Where you been, bud?
I don't want the authorities coming after me. You've put our names down below. My handle is Paulicino on everything. It's this Paulicino double L thing. And that's just me everywhere, forever. That's my Twitch handle if you want to find me on Twitch. It's my other social medias like Instagram and Twitter and things like that. It's even my Tumblr, which I still run and very occasionally like post pictures or bits of writing on, because I, in my spare time, also just write increasingly social commentary stuff and how I feel about wealth inequality and things in the world, because I have feelings about that. And I have a Patreon under the same name as well, if you'd like to support me and read me writing about games and social justice and even immigration, because I live in Canada and I used to live in the UK and I have feelings about some of that. And that's it. I'm just around and I'm just like this all the time. I can't stop at this point. It's just this. So if you liked this, there's more of it. If you don't, I'm not offended.
There's a lot to like. Astra.
I am on Twitter and Instagram as Ulzarith. That's ULZAORITH. Probably easier to look up astracrompton.com, my website, and all of my there. You can find my writing Unity RPG, as well as None More Dark, Vampire Requiem, Redux books, both writing and art. And again, I'm around for, like, I am a freelance writer and a freelance illustrator. So if you need help with projects, if you need resources, if you need assistance on something, then feel free to shoot me a line. I'm happy to help.
Nice. Hire them well. Travis.
My name is Travis Legge, Legge. I am at Travis Legge pretty much everywhere on the internet except for Twitch, where I am Plastic Age Plays, but most of the time you'll find me over at the Onyx Path channel. I do a lot of work for Onyx Path, also Aegis Studios, and what else? Yeah, those are the places to find me, I suppose. Oh, and periodically I play over at Roll for Seduction's Twitch channel as well.
Nice. And I've been Kelly Clark, he and him, and you can find me on Storyteller's Vault. You can find me in an upcoming Aberrant release called Hated and Feared. And most excitingly, you can... I can't wait for it either. I wrote fun stuff and I can't talk about it. Like, I got some of the juiciest parts of the book because it required very little mechanics. And it's so fun. Sweet. I wrote some really devious shit. I
can't wait till people see the cover. I
haven't even seen the cover.
I haven't seen it either, but I just did the art notes recently.
Oh, really?
It's one of the favorite things I've ever described. I can't wait till people can see it.
Okay, that's gonna be great. Is he gonna get a physical? We'll talk later. You're not allowed to say anything. Thank you so much. The thing I'm most excited about, though, is Vampire the Requiem for Rome, 2nd edition, coming to Storyteller's Vault. If you follow Dork Tales, you're going to hear tons about it. I am trying to get our head of studio, editor, developer, Sam Young, to play a game of it in a toga, and he's fighting me every step of the way, but I really want him to do it, and I don't think I'm going to get what I want, but I'm going to get what I want, even if I have to show up at his house with a toga or a bed sheet, either way. But thank you so much for tuning in to...
play so bad.
Right? It'd be great if we could all get around a table and do it. I think that's the only way we could get him, is if we did it in person and then filmed it that way. But thank you so much for tuning into this panel on writing. We're going to be back in 15 minutes with Why We Love the World of Darkness, a tribute to White Wolf, Onyx Path, and all of the World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness stuff on both sides of that coin. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have a little bit of couch cushion money, top it in the tip jar down below. Thank you to everybody who has donated so far. And prepare yourself for a Mage of the Ascension ASMR video, apparently. Bye, everyone.